Hi, so welcome back to Mechanical May. This time we're talking Short Circuit 1 and 2. I decided to compile them into one. I thought it was better to have the number 5 arc in one place. Now, a couple of off-topic things first. G.W. Bailey, typecast in the 80s, this and the Police Academy movies. Then again, he's the one with the paychecks, so who wins out of this? But I think we also have to discuss the Indian elephant in the room, Ben Givari, as played by Fisher Stevens. These days, you probably get claims of cultural appropriation and whitewashing, and you'd probably shove someone like Kal Penn or Sacha Dhawan or someone like that into it, who would still have to do the cod accent, and therefore it would be just as bad, but that's an argument for another time. It's part of the film, I can't change it. It's there, so I love the film despite its flaws, and I think that's the important thing to take away. So, one of the first things noticed is the Vitruvian Man is being stamped on all these Saint robots, which, okay, another quick off-topic thing. Saint was the word first. They came up with the word first, they just wanted to use Saint for some reason. Then they came up with the acronym. Here's my justification for this.
I want you to meet Strategic Artificially Intelligent Nuclear Transport, or Saint as we call it.
You would not make that up and go, oh, that says Saint. That's not how it would work. But anyway, so the Vitruvian Man is stamped on them. Now, I looked it up because I wasn't entirely aware. Obviously, we've all seen it, but what it means was a mystery to me. And in fact, it's kind of an architectural design, really. That the sort of ideal proportions are human. Now, if you stretch it a little, you're saying that the ideal is human, which is very interesting, obviously, given the fact that that is number 5's goal, to be more human. And, it's very interesting that symbology sort of being really part of him. He's had it stamped on him from birth, if you will, imprinted on him from birth that humanity is the ideal. Now, this film does have, a lot of very interesting little kind of humorous moments in the beginning, like literally chasing tail with the coffee boat. I love that. But a lot of the meat of the film really doesn't happen until he's out. Once he's activated, by the lightning, and I will get onto the Frankenstein symbols a bit later. But it's really when he's like escaped that it really starts to pick up a lot of traction. That isn't a pun about his treads, by the way. But it's interesting. Quite early on in the film, he's just a machine. He's trotted out because, unlike Chappie last time, no one expected life or a simulation thereof, something very close to, and I found that very intriguing. It's one of those threads that comes up a lot, even in ones that they are simulating life quite a lot. It's just a machine, it's just a toy, it's just a tool. And like I say, with all of these films that I'm covering, that's one of the things that really intrigues me. And when he comes out, he's basically just been born. But obviously, as with Chappie, he's got an accelerated process with that, and he's kind of like a child. Children at a certain age start asking why. Every single thing you do, like, I'm going out. Why? Because I need to work. Why? So I can get some money. Why? So I can buy you things. Why? Because I'm not a crayon. Try that. If a child's constantly asking why, just shout "I'm not a crayon" at them. It'll hopefully derail them. Or start asking why back. That might confuse them. But he's, as I say, he starts asking why a lot. He's constantly seeking this why. But he's not asking why. He's asking for input. But it's the same drive. It's this same desire to know that suddenly comes in. At a certain age, as I say. And he's, in other ways, children are constantly mimicking their surroundings. They're constantly kind of taking cues from the rest of the world around them. This is why kids play dress up in mummy's clothes. It's mimicry. It's a form of natural learning that they have. And his mimicry comes in pop culture reference because he hasn't got like a father figure, if you will, that he can dress up like, or a mother figure. I suppose Stephanie is a kind of maternal trope in this, but he's not going to start dressing up like that because he's not geared in the same way, if you will. He's not got that human drive. It's a slightly different method. But like I say, he exhibits the two, why and mimicry, which I thought was quite interesting. And it's quite interesting that with, obviously, like I said, maternal trope, being sort of embodied with Ali Sheedy in Stephanie, because, you know, she has all the animals and she's very nurturing environment, like I was saying with Yolandi. This nurture in this child really is quite an interesting take on things, you know, like how we accept nature versus nurture as an important part of human development, and how that nurture manifests, you know, positive reinforcement versus negative. And this is interesting to see, you know, these two examples so far that, you know, we've had both the negative and the positive reinforcements provided. Now, I did say I was going to quickly sort of tackle the Frankenstein images, and obviously we had the lightning earlier, but when he's bouncing around in the yard, you know, hopping after the grasshopper, he squishes it. And this is also the point that he starts to come to terms with the idea of death, the weight of mortality, when Stephanie can't, you know, reassemble. And like I say, watching this, it made me instantly come back to Boris Karloff, you know, the Universal Frankenstein, when he throws the girl into the water, because she's throwing, you know, the flowers are floating by like little boats, and to the creature, he's like, oh, maybe she'll float too. It's an accident. It's purely innocent, as is number 5 squishing the grasshopper. But when she doesn't surface, that's when he knows that something's amiss. You know what I mean? And this is that same idea. It immediately spoke to me of Frankenstein, and in Short Circuit 2. I did want to kind of do each film individually, but there's an interesting crossover here, because the two books that he really sort of is drawn to in the bookstore are Frankenstein and Pinocchio. So, you know, even the filmmakers know, or the filmmakers are telling us there is a connection here, which is good, because I spotted it on my own, and then, as I say, watched the second one, I was like, I got it. But it's interesting, you know, his ability there to suddenly get that weight of mortality. Now, only things that have a life per se can fear death, can be concerned with death, can see death as this horror to be faced. And he experiences that, you know, when he thinks he's just going to go back and get disassembled and reassembled and he's going to be fine, and then he realises that no, living things can't be disassembled and come back. It's not possible. He suddenly fears. He understands that disassembly is death, the end of him. And you know, he shows a lot of human traits even in the first film. You know, without like a lot of the extra development that he goes through. You know, obviously, with his desire for input and his mimicry, and how he, you know, just devours books. I wish I could be like that. You know, his craving for knowledge is amazing. It's brilliant. I love it. But it's self-improvement. This is something that, you know, really high-level AI is capable of. But he's not meant to be high-level AI. So what else is is capable of self-improvement? Oh, humanity. He even has pareidolia. I've probably said that wrong. But you know, he's looking into the clouds and seeing shapes. Now, that requires creativity and imagination, which you can't really program an imagination, especially in 1986. You know, you can't really program imaginations, and I think a lot of these films that I'm tackling, you know, these machines are developing things like imagination, like creativity, which can't be programmed for, like I say. And all of these things point to the fact that he's a lot more human than he has any right to be. So one of the big kind of issues that I have with this is the fact that Newton, as the creator, in a way also doesn't want to admit the fact that he's alive, or at least he's showing similarities to being alive. I find that quite sad. You know, I think that if I were to create a robot that suddenly manifested signs of life, I'd be on that. I'd be investigating it. I'd be really curious. I wouldn't be taking it as a malfunction. You know, and I think that is one of the missed ideas of this film. You know, the fact that Newton himself wouldn't accept it. And Ben, you know, no one at Nova really accepts it until the end of the film, really. You know, that's the only point that they accept that he could be alive. They need him to prove it in 50 different ways, and I think that's not the case. Most robotic scientists, if they even had an inkling of AI, would be like, okay, It shouldn't be like that. You know, the AI of this level, it shouldn't be like that. So we need to just make sure. It wouldn't be like, it's not like that. They'd be like, okay, this is positive. This could be an indication. You know, there'd be more for it. So that's one of the big sort of downsides, I think, of this film, that Newton doesn't embrace it, and Ben, you know, and anyone else, like I say, doesn't embrace it sooner. But one of the great things about number 5 is he has a greater respect for life than the Nova security guys. When he's being attacked, he wants to retaliate non-lethally. He even retaliates non-lethally with the other numbered robots, the other Saint robots. He repurposes them. He tweaks with their programming, but he doesn't kill them. He doesn't disassemble them, even though he knows they haven't got the same level of intelligence. His respect for life in all forms, once he realizes, that you can't kill something and it comes back, at least, his respect for life in all forms is above that of some humans in this film, and I think that's a very telling statement being made here. That sometimes things that aren't human can actually appreciate life better. But it is interesting because I mentioned it before. Where again in this emotional manipulation is attempted on number 5, which, if he's just a machine, surely that shouldn't be the case. You wouldn't emotionally manipulate a machine. But I mean, that's more of a thread in the second one, so I'll leave more of that, because I think with Oscar and things like that, there is a lot more to it. But one of the great things, to sort of cap off, if you will, the first film, when they're talking about, he's kind of malfunctioning, and he says life is not a malfunction. It's not. Life is not a malfunction. Life is a function. For us, why should he be different? He is a machine, yes, as they keep battering on about in the film. But humans are a machine. We're just a biological machine. Food goes in, it gets processed, so fuel. It helps the parts move, like gears and servos in a machine, like joints and muscles in us. And we are machines. We are biological machines. So just because we can have consciousness, why can't he? And I think that's the greatest thing to take from that film, from both of them, really. If we can have consciousness and are machines in a form, so can he. And then, of course, the end of the film, he chooses his name and goes away for 2 years, which leads us into Short Circuit 2. And first of all, I love Charles Fox's music. The start, the theme tune, it's brilliant, and the later kind of like dramatic attack music. Brilliant music for the movie. Just wanted to quickly get that out there as a little off topic while we start the second one. With the second one, I get the feeling there was a heist movie created and they wanted to do a Short Circuit sequel and just mash the two together. I'm not sure that one is particularly... it does feel like there were two ideas that were put together, if that makes more sense. And I do think that is somewhat to the film's detriment, but at the end of the day, I still enjoyed it, and like I said, the music just really helps me out on this. But another quick off-topic thing, actually, because I obviously mentioned, G.W. Bailey being typecast. I feel Michael McKean is typecast a lot. He's often playing these sleazy kind of characters. In the X-Files, it was very similar. The clown in the Voyager episode that he did, is kind of, Fear, was kind of similarly sleazy as well, and very selfish. And I do feel like it's, he's again got an interesting kind of niche that he fits. I mean, again, he's the one making all the paychecks, so he's winning out of this. But interestingly, while we're talking about him, I think Fred does have a very similar journey to most of the characters in the first one, where they're just like, it's a tool, oh wait, maybe it's more. Because remember, Stephanie and Newton are now living in Montana on a ranch with him, so they've gotten used to him being real. Ben kind of accepts it because he gets feedback, so all these people like Oscar and the robbers and everything like that are going to see him as a tool. There are elements of rehashing, which, again, I think is as much sort of padding to a degree, because like I say, they wanted a heist movie and they wanted a sequel, and they just happened to compile them together. But I think an interesting part of Fred's character is that obviously he's very mercenary, he's a con man, he's always about the bottom line, how can he profit. And of course, the word robot comes from a word meaning slave. And I think really that is where, even if Fred accepts that he's somewhat sentient, he would still see him as a slave. He still sees him as a second-rate class, second-class citizen. He's not even a citizen until the end, is he? But you know what I mean. He's not seen as an equal. He's seen as a means to an end. In the same way that people would say ideas about people of African descent many years ago to say that it's fine, they're slaves, they're not real people. They're not people like you and I. One of the things that bugs me about this film is the situation with Ben. Not just the reasons I mentioned before, but he's after citizenship in this film. Now, I don't think he needs it. Let me quickly take you back to the first film.
Where are you from, anyway?
Bakersfield originally.
No, I mean your ancestors.
Oh, damn. Pittsburgh.
So according to that, he's natively a Californian, if my knowledge of US geography is correct, and his parents are from Philadelphia. So I don't believe he'd need separate citizenship down the line. This seems like an oversight. But maybe it isn't. Maybe I'm being really generous, but maybe it isn't. In this, we have Johnny Five wanting acceptance as a living being. And maybe Ben's desire for citizenship is to give him a parallel. They both want to be accepted. One in the species that he feels that he's closest to, and one in the country that he wants to call home. It gives them a common thread. They both can have some development, and then the end isn't just Johnny's victory, it's Ben's victory as well, and I suppose Sandy's and Fred's victory. Obviously with the success of the company, everyone gets a positive. And I really think that's what it's for. I think, it gives them that ability to bond, because they never really did in the first film. But it gives them that ability to bond, and for Ben to come out with some great lines like, I've been a human my whole life and I still don't understand what it's all about, kind of thing. Like I say, it does give him that ground, and I think it really works, to give him that commonality. Now, another element in this, if we sort of look back at the first film, is I would consider that to be Johnny, number 5 as he was then. Sort of as a child, a toddler, really quite young, and then he's starting to seek his identity. I mean, arguably you could say the end of the first film is the start of that, when he chooses a name for himself. That's the beginning of some kind of identity. He's now kind of possibly into like teenage, young adulthood, that kind of area, which is where we start to try on different hats, figure out who we are, figure out what kind of social groups we want to belong to, what makes us tick, what are we interested in. He's been voraciously devouring input, but now he's learning to be more discerning. He's learning to figure out what input he really wants. For example, choosing the 2 books in the bookstore. He read a load of them, but he wants these 2. He may have already read them, but he really wants these 2. These are part of him. He sees something that resonates with him, and that's part of humanity. Now, with this sort of growing up and finding out who you are comes a distinct personality, and you do start to look at things external to you in that. And one of the things, obviously, is the Mr. Rogers bit, which is very sad. It's like, this is a ventriloquist dummy. He's not human. He can't feel. Only humans can feel. Well, no, there's a living, not breathing, but robot right here that is clearly feeling. At this point in time, he's feeling sad, Mr. Rogers, because of you. But it is interesting how Johnny's attempts to find out who he is, do go down a lot of dead ends, like it does in real life. He desires to fit in, so he helps Los Locos, the gang, boost car stereos. Not a good idea. He wants to fit in and befriend Oscar, so he helps him without meaning to. He's taken in by Oscar's friendliness because he just wants to be accepted. He wants a friend. Now, Oscar is an interesting character because he has these friendly overtures. He's very outwardly a nice guy, it seems, but he sees him as a thing. It's quite clear. He's a tool. He says it. He's a means to an end. He's a way to get into the vault. And his friendly overtures are simply emotional manipulation. Now, I've said before, it is a thread with these films that I've chosen to look at. You can either trust that it's a machine and it won't be susceptible to emotional manipulation, so why bother, or it's a being capable of emotion and therefore susceptible to emotional manipulation and shouldn't be treated as a machine. You can't have it both ways, and a lot of people in these films do. And Fred, it takes him the whole film to really kind of accept him as a being. It takes him basically to be on the cusp of death before they actually bond, and he goes, wait a minute, you are more than meets the eye. No, that's Transformers. You are more than the sum of your parts. Insofar as he tries to sell him, slavery again is a theme in a lot of these films that I've looked at, and it comes up again here. Johnny himself is furious. You cannot sell me. I am not a thing. I'm not property. I'm a being. I am alive. You cannot do this. The same justification exists in history. They're not really people. They don't feel the same. They're not as valid as you or I, as white people. And we got over that. Well, most of us. We've realised that that's wrong. So maybe this is a question in our future. If we start to build more and more complex AI, are we going to have this issue where when it becomes close enough to a human? Where's that line? Where do we draw that line in the sand? When it can feel? I mean, what is a feeling? It's a chemical reaction, surely. If it's a machine, can it have a chemical reaction? And there are a lot of quandaries about this, as I say, in all of these films. But I do think that the core of these films is about a robot growing up. Really, this is, like I say, it's why I wanted to capture both of them in one. Like I say, it deals with slavery, it deals with emotional manipulation and the validity of a human being, where that comes from. But it is a growing up tale. These two. We see a child born, the lightning bolt brings him into existence as number 5. We see him develop his identity, go down some dead ends, and at the end of it, he's all shiny and golden and ready to face the world. He's now a citizen. He's a valid member of society. He has matured. He's now an adult. Johnny 5 has grown up. And as he says at the end, how do you feel? I feel alive! So what better way to end than that? Such a sweet, twee, happy ending for some rather twee, adorable films. I can't really say that for next week's film, unfortunately. I might stretch to a bittersweet if pushed, but at least it's got a kid in it. So I'll leave you puzzling what that is for next week, and until then, as always, take care.